I decided to record this show tonight because, well, my back is hurting. So it couldn't be better timing to do the episode that I'm calling All Things Pain. My name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lip. Yes, All Things Pain. Wow, it's interesting. It really is. The fact that I'm doing this show right now, August 20th, 2025, and it is going to be released on August 30th, 2025. A very significant date. That means quite a bit to me as far as all things pain that for sure I've had to deal with over the last 30, uh, has it been 30 years? Longer. Yeah, I've been dealing with a lot of pain throughout my life, and I wanted to say it was 30 years ago, but that would have been at when I was 45. So now it's really 47 years that I've been dealing with all of these crazy issues. And then even further than that, it's really like 34 years when I go all the way back and start talking about when I started having some issues. And that's why I'm going to get into that tonight. And you're going to get to hear this, like I said, August 30th, 2025, which I reiterate, a very significant date. Turns out that that would be the 20th anniversary of when I destroyed my ankle. Also happens to be the birthday of the greatest cashier who has ever lived. Sarah, happy birthday if you're listening to this upon the day of release, and happy belated birthday if you hear this after it's been released. Once again, she was without a doubt the greatest cashier who has ever lived. Never been to any register at any store that has had any cashier who has come close to matching her. But we'll get to the events of her birthday and my destroyed ankle throughout the process of the show. Now, normally, this would be the time that I would be doing the fill in the blank. And don't get me wrong, that's exactly what it is going to be. But the blank that is the question for the fill in the blank happens to be about the object which is on the screen right now as you're watching. Well, that object is the subject of the fill in the blank, and it's the perfect thing that I could possibly use for this episode. What is before you now is the question. What is that thing? The blank can be filled in as that is the brace that I wore on my right arm after I tore my bicep and had the surgery, and I used that for about 3 or 4 weeks after I began, during the time when I was doing physical therapy on my repaired bicep at that time. So the question is, what is that thing that is in your screen right now? The answer is, that's the brace that I wore for my torn bicep after surgery when I was beginning rehab. And again, usually I explain what the object is. That is usually one of my paintings that I have on display here for the visual for the show. Not a painting. It's that device that reminds me every day that, yeah, my arm's not quite going to be the same as it used to be. But in truth, this whole show is about why my body is not what it was since I was, uh, I guess, 13, 14, something like that. Yeah, long time ago. But then again, whose body is the same as it was when they were 13 or 14? Realistically, nobody's. I'm just going to explain to you why I'm in the shape that I'm in. And on that note, I'm going to ring the bell and start the main event. Here we are, main event. Once again, this episode, which is going to be the 223rd consecutive episode, is going to be called All Things Pain. All Things Pain. The 20th year anniversary of the destruction of my ankle. It's hard to think that it's been that long, but it has. It's been 20 years as of the date of this episode's release, August 30th, 20, 25. 20 years ago, which would have been August 30th, 2005, overnight is when I destroyed my ankle. But we'll get to that slowly but surely. I can first tell you that the first time I did any episode regarding my pain was very early in the show. Very, very early. It was, in fact, the second episode I did. I simply called it Pain. And I did, I believe, my little advertisement for the show was my ankle, where it has that C scar on my right ankle, where they had to do the repair on my ankle at this point in time, 20 years ago. But when I realized that I was coming up on the anniversary, and I thought, I need to put something in here, and then I realized, why not go back and go into everything? Because I don't believe I touched on the stuff that happened before um, I started getting surgeries, which definitely counts. And I definitely only scratched the surface on some of the stuff that happened afterwards. Well, of course, I told you about my back, but not quite as much as it is. And I did an entire episode about my torn bicep. But it turns out that there's even a little bit more injury that I've acquired over the last couple of months. So, as recently fresh as my torn bicep repair is, there's actually a little bit newer injury that I'm dealing with on top of everything else. We're going to get to that. I know, just off the top of my head, I didn't put any notes down for this episode. And fortunately, as a result of the first couple injuries I'm going to get into, I was actually able to recall most of these problems. And why do I say it's important that I could recall most of these problems? We're going to get to all of that. This episode may run a little long, but in order to cover everything, I don't think I have enough meat here to do multiple episodes. So I'm going to try to pack it into this as tightly as I can, but I'm not going to let any restraints really hold me back because I want to get into everything. So the first actual injury that I required that was a lifelong problem that is, I'm going to say, hopefully going to rear its ugly head, which it will, I imagine, in the next, I don't want to put a timeline on it, but I'm going to assume another 10 years or so. This could be a problem for me, but as they say, fortunately, there's a nice desk here in front of me, so knock on wood, maybe it won't be a problem. But I can imagine that whatever happened that day was not good. and the result later on certainly makes it so. Seventh grade, I'm preparing to throw shot put for the very first time. Never threw it before in my, well, in sixth grade, I did a little experiment when the teachers were letting us throw a little bit. I touched one and I didn't really do too well with it. Wasn't really my cup of tea. But in seventh grade, the track coach essentially put it on. I was a high jumper and a sprinter, and he said, "Hey," when I was going back to wrestling practice, he was the coach for the women's basketball team, girls basketball team, and he said, "You going to do track?" And I told him, "Yeah." He goes, "What events?" I told him, "High jump and the 100." He looked at me, tilted his head a little bit, put back straight, and he said, "You should try shot put and discus." From that point on, Mr. K had me. I tried to run, and I was just not as fast as I was. My jumping technique wasn't entirely legal for the high jump. So then I said, okay, let me go follow him out there and throw the shot put. First time I put the thing in my hand and I'm about to throw a standard standing throw. Just throw it without using any technique. And I launched it. I let it go, maybe went 30 feet. But upon that happening, I heard a pop in my wrist. And I looked down and I couldn't believe it. At that point in time, my right hand was wide open, and I just turned my wrist upward in a circular motion. And every time I did it, there was a horrible popping sound. There wasn't any pain, but there was a popping sound. And then I just grabbed my wrist and I just lifted it up with my left hand and then back down, and the popping stopped. Didn't hurt, didn't think anything of it. From that point on, I believe I was 13, going on 14. I could do, I could pull my wrist down and I could continuously pop my wrist on command whenever I wanted to from the age of 14 until uh, within recent memory. We're talking, I might have been 41, 42. It was no more than 5 years ago, no less than 3 years ago. So somewhere between 42 and 43, somewhere in that neighborhood. I went to pop my wrist and it didn't do it anymore. Knowing what I know now about cartilage and the way that things move in joints, that noise was very possibly bone on bone. And I was able to pop it back. And now all of a sudden it doesn't do it anymore. Means that I probably ground something in my wrist to powder over that 30-year period of time when I would stop and I would do that. Not necessarily the best thing in the world to have done. But I do believe that that may come back to bite me. I hope it doesn't. Again, knocking on wood. But if it does, I'll be ready for it. We're going to advance now, only a year from that point, as I became a starting wrestler at eighth grade. My weight class was 170. I was proud of it because the entire summer between seventh grade and eighth grade, I would tell everybody who listened to me that I was going to become the Ocean County champion in seventh grade and eighth grade at the 170-pound weight class. First problem was the year before, I was wrestling in seventh grade at only 158. And I pretty much weighed in around 155 to 156, 157. So I was pretty close. So initially, I would have to have gained at least 10 pounds to move up to the 170-pound weight class to stay under and still have moderate success with it because a little bit bigger weight class, guys are a little stronger. So I decided it would be a good idea to intensify everything I did, and I started working out heavily. I got some weights for Christmas. I would hop on my bike and during that entire summer, literally ride my bike 5, 6 miles after I ate breakfast, went home, ate lunch, go back out, ride another, I don't know, 5 to 10 miles. Then I would go hang out with my friends, come home, do some lifting, and I would start my day over again. That's how my summer of seventh and eighth grade went. Ate a relatively good diet and worked out pretty well, grew a little bit, and all that work gave me the ability to pack on about 10 pounds. I went from 157 to 168. And, well, no, not 168. I was later. I was 163. I only gained during the summer because I put on a little bit of muscle and didn't actually gain a whole lot of weight overall. I only had about 6 pounds. So I came in at 163. The coach asked me if I wanted to go down in weight. And I said, nah, I'll go up to 170 because that's what I wanted to do. Worked on a diet of instant mashed potatoes and chicken nuggets of all things. And during that time in wrestling season, that's where I ended up getting up to about 168. Had a decent season, but it was mired by something that the NFL was sort of hiding, and pro wrestling didn't really tell anybody the severity of what they were or how they were. And I'm going to say most people my age had their bell rung and they'd be okay. In eighth grade, I had my wink wink bell rung. Oh, this is where the memory comes in. At least twice. Yeah, it was 10th grade. It happened to me another 3 times. And then after I got out of high school, I took a header at the church and I rang my bell again. So essentially, to my knowledge, based on everything the NFL had reported as far as symptoms go, it's real safe to say that as a result of that match that I had against the kid in Lacey in eighth grade, where he literally charged right into me and headbutted. Totally forgot that entire match, except for the fact that I knew I lost. The craziest part about that was when I was counting these symptoms of what would be concussions, that one against the kid at Lacey was one I never counted. Whenever I told people, I always told them I've had at least 5 concussions that I'm aware of. But it wasn't until about legitimately the last 8 months where I was really thinking about it. It popped in my mind that match against Lacey where I got headbutted, and I couldn't remember about it because one of the major symptoms is the loss of memory at a time, having blank spots. Definitely had some light sensitivity from that. The one at not Homedale, Long Branch, kid essentially German suplexed me. I landed on my head, and I don't remember the ride back to the school. I remember going there the next day after the match was over, but I don't remember coming from Long Branch back to Southern Regional and then Hawk. I don't remember the whole trip. Don't remember the result of my buddy Neil in the heavyweight match. I don't remember if he won or lost. I just remember him saying he couldn't believe about his opponent, but I don't remember if he won or lost. I could not remember. Concussion number two. Then, of course, playing football, I headbutted a kid that was on my team because he thought it was cool, and I don't remember anything about that game except that I didn't play. Then I played special teams and literally got decleated, light sensitivity, headache, nausea. I was out of it. That one, concussion. And my personal favorite was when I was throwing javelin in my sophomore year, and I hit myself in the back of the head. Last time I ever threw javelin, and again, I don't remember the trip back home or really anything that happened that day. And then, of course, the one when I hit my head on it at the church, blank spots, massive nausea, and of course, the people just like, well, you just got your bell wrong. What we know about those things before versus what we know about that stuff right now. Yeah, I had at least six concussions that I'm aware of. Scary version are the ones that I may not remember and may never remember. Just as awful as it gets. But those were, like I said, eighth grade through 10th grade. I had a lot of these things. And when you really think about it, it was extra bad because it was maybe a month in between the two concussions in eighth grade and around a month between the two that I got in 10th grade. So there was not a whole lot of time for the brain to heal after each one of these two concussion deals. And like I said, sophomore year was when I had three that I'm pretty sure of when I got hit in the back of the head with the javelin. But at least there was that whole wrestling season because we're going to get to what happened. So I didn't wrestle. Like 3 months there, probably like 4 months between the last one in football season. I want to hit my head with a javelin. So it's probably a good 4 months of healing there. But then here comes another one. At least it was a few years, probably 4 years before I had the last one that I'm aware of. And boy, that was not a fun thing to think about. The headache, the nausea were my biggest things, and then the blank spots. A little bit of light sensitivity wasn't fun. Concussions, bad, folks. Concussions, bad. Now we're going to talk about the stuff where they had to cut me a little bit. Sophomore year of high school, had a great practice. And it wasn't really the best idea because it turns out that there was a system for attendance where we had these little tags that had red and blue, red on one side, blue on the other side. Each day you go to practice, you'd flip it over so the other color would come out. And the coach would be able to tell who's there by attendance, by which tag was up. If everybody was red that day and yours is blue, you're not there. and vice versa. Blue and then the red, you're not there. Crazy how that works. Turns out I was sick a couple times, and the coaches had a rule that if you missed 3 practices, you were off the team. I decided to go to practice, and I knew that I was on my way in. Wasn't going to miss any more practice. I'm ready to play. I show up to the door of the locker room, and this is one of my favorite stories of all time. I stop in front of the door, and a very soft voice comes to me. And I'm not kidding you. This happened. And it said, "Do not go." During that time, it felt like everything stopped. And it was like, if I had to tell you, it felt like an hour where I sat there in front of that locker room. And after that voice had spoken, and then everything came back to focus, and everything started moving again. But of course, the sophomore that I was knew that I had to get to practice, so I was going to go. Turns out earlier that morning, which makes it even funnier, so a couple of girls in my homeroom were talking, "Oh, you're going to get killed playing football. It's going to get banged up, right?" Of course, I stopped everything and said, "Hey, nothing's going to happen to me." And it was that same day. I'm invincible. I literally said the word invincible. Sure enough, I go to practice, have an outstanding practice against the varsity. The defensive coordinator wanted somebody who could mimic this guy, Brock Velez from Brick, who played a very unique middle linebacker position, which changed the alignment to the defense. I know it's a little football technical. Bear with me. They ran a normal 4-3 defense, which is 4 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, 3 linebackers rather, and 4 defensive backs in the back. But the middle linebacker, Brock Velez, was given an option. We don't know if it was his option or the coach told him to do it. But either way, what he would do as middle linebacker was he would change from, depending on the situation, he would move from his middle linebacker spot and become the nose tackle and change the defense to a 5-2 instead of a 4-3, giving it a totally different look. And he was pretty good at that nose spot. And because I had similar speed to him, they decided to put me in that spot. And lo and behold, I tore apart our offensive line. They couldn't handle it for multiple reasons. For one, I was actually pretty effective as my disguise, which made it even worse because sometimes they told me that they just sometimes go up there and just start off as the defensive tackle, the nose tackle. Other times, just be in your linebacker spot, and then sometimes fake like you're going to go and be the nose tackle, but stand up and be the linebacker, or fake like you're going to be the linebacker, and then boom, put your hand down the line and be the nose tackle. So it was very confusing to the center, and he got very frustrated. I understand. It's a very complicated little gimmick that they ran. And there was a point where I made the starting varsity offense have to run one singular play 10 times in a row. And they told me each time to continue to move. Then, of course, the one time I ended up back on the defensive line, the center was so frustrated from getting yelled at because he was the one I was beating to death because he was the one who didn't know who to block. He gave me a cut block. For those of you who don't know, that is when you just drop your shoulder and it hit the knee of the lineman who's in front of you. And I was the lineman who was in front of him. got my knee. I stood straight up. The tackle just pushed me down the rest of the way. He just tapped me, and I was done. Torn cartilage. Had to get surgery. But fortunately, the tear that I had in my cartilage wasn't a complete tear, it was a slight tear. So when the orthopedic surgeon went in, instead of having to fix the repair, what they did was they just snipped out the little piece that was torn and they smoothed out the cartilage. So they cleaned it up essentially. That cost me my wrestling season, and that center was super apologetic for the entire rest of the time that I knew him in high school. And then a couple times he showed up to see some friends, and the first thing he said to me was he was sorry. And I understood. I will always forgive him for it because he was frustrated. They got to him. I get it. And unfortunately, when we went to go play brick at the time, brick in the existence of our high school up until about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, my high school, Southern Eagle, had never beaten Brick Township, and they destroyed us that day. And this was my sophomore year. Same year as that concussion in spring track. How pleasant, right? Junior year, I pretty much escaped injury free, had a good track season, and life moved on. How did that happen? Well, I didn't play football, and I chose not to wrestle. I went home after school every day, normal time until track season. That's just how that worked. But there was an interesting thing where a coach was looking at me all the time. Was like, "Yeah, I heard you played. I heard all this stuff about you. I've seen you in the weight room. We'd really like to be able to use you in your senior year. It'd be great." And I was like, thinking about it, not sure. And he kept at me. He kept at me. He kept at me. He wore me down. And I thought to myself, I had envisioned when I was a sophomore in my senior year having three specific objects. Three objects that I have to this day. And the first of those objects was my varsity jacket that had my track letter on it. The second object was my class ring that had a wrestler in it because I loved it and it just made sense. Wrestling ring, you know? And the third object was something that I coveted more than the other two, believe it. And on the down low, I couldn't wait, and I was kind of excited. That's what really put me over the top because my high school changed jerseys all the time, and it turned out that in my senior year we got new jerseys again, and I knew that the seniors got their jerseys at the end of the year. They kept them, and that was too much for me to not handle. I couldn't handle it. I needed my jersey because I wanted my football jersey, my wrestling ring, and my track varsity jacket. So I joined up. And during that summer, I had one slightly bad injury before the football season began. I was playing baseball with my cousins and one of their friends. Their friend wasn't a very good batter. And we were playing baseball with a tennis ball and a wiffle ball. Don't knock it. You could hit that wiffle ball. You could hit that wiffle ball with a tennis ball or a wiffle ball bat. You can do some damage with that thing. That thing will go out pretty good distance if you get it, man. It really is. And at the same time, it's safe on Windows. And problem is, it's not safe for eyeballs. I was back playing catcher. My cousin's friend had a terrible, terrible swing, hit the tennis ball. It went straight up. And as the catcher, it got me right in the eye. And it was my right eye. And wouldn't you know that the fibers from the tennis ball scratched my cornea in my right eye. And I had to go to the doctor. The light was impossible to see. Even watching TV hurt. It was terrible. I couldn't play football for about a week until that thing settled down, but there was no surgery, fortunately, for that. But it did keep me out of summer practice. And boy, no, I did that wrong. That wasn't in my senior year. That was my sophomore year that happened. That was sophomore year. Or was it? That was sophomore year. Because I was styling Phil the entire time. And that's the name they gave me because I wore a Hawaiian shirt and I was watching practice with the sunglasses on because I couldn't see. I actually messed that one up. That was sophomore year. It was. Well, either way, I scratched the cornea in my eye and it was not fun. Back to my senior year, I'm ready to play football. I hadn't gotten my cleats yet. I was going to get them the next day, but practice had started. So I just wore regular shoes. And this is the thing that makes me always wonder what could have been. Regular shoes, everybody else was wearing cleats and I was wearing pads, but my footwork and my balance as a defensive tackle at this point, because I had been lifting a lot heavier and I had a really good shot putting physique. I was strong on the inside and I was a defensive tackle and I threw people around and my balance was good wearing regular sneakers. And I told everybody I'm not gonna get my cleats till next week. Imagine how much better I'm gonna be when I actually have good traction. I'm doing this to you guys with regular sneakers and you're wearing cleats and I'm tossing you around and I'm not sliding. Yeah, I was like that. But unfortunately, that next day I come back with my cleats and I'm destroying people. And then we go and we hit the sled. And that was the end of my football career. Non contact, just pumping, hitting the sled, pushing the sled. I go to just simply fire out of my stance and I felt the same thing, the same pain that I felt when I got the cut block. But this is me coming out of my stance, just hitting the sled. And it just was like, oh, I knew it was gone as soon as it happened. Like I tore my cartilage again. And I knew it. And that was fun. But I'm going to let this play out as long as I could. I went down and I went to the starting defense again, right in my spot, the strong side defensive tackle. I played about 10 plays, and then that was it. I had nothing left. I penetrated. I played in the backfield like I always did. I opened up double teams, and I was free and moving through, and I even still was able to get the offensive line off of my linebackers behind me. I was doing good for them 10 plays. But play number 11, well, the defensive coordinator took a good look at my stance and he saw that I was like, I couldn't go down because my knee was just gone. They pulled me out and they said, "You all right?" I'm like, "I'm not." They told them what happened. Like, I was hitting the sled. You know how slow I was coming back down. It wasn't because I was tired. It was because I was hurt. And in some ways, that coach that was trying to get me to join the team, he just was like, "Oh no, it's my fault." And I'm like, "No, it wasn't. It just wasn't meant to be." I go to the trainer. He looks around. He goes, "Yeah, we're going to send you to Temple and see what's going on." And sure enough, tore it again. Sure enough, they had to repair it again. And that was the end of that. Crazy part about it was, though, here comes my favorite part. At this point in time, I was 15 when I did my first injury, which required me to have surgery. I was 17 when I did my second one. Now, I did that whole story about getting sick in 2023, not 23, excuse me, 2003. I happened to have turned at that time 25. Now here comes the killer. When I destroyed my ankle, which is where I'm going to right now, wouldn't you know that I was 27 years old? Meaning that when I was 15, 17, 25, 27, pretty bad things happened. Not necessarily a good friend. I often made the joke, 57 could be scary. But fortunately, the trend was broken. But now, here we are, 27 years old, 2005, 20 years from the date that this show is released. Like I said, cashier Sarah's birthday, working overnight. I was showing her some stuff because she was interested in becoming a manager, and I was one. And I showed her where not to sweep in the parking lot. I'll never forget it because I had planned this for 3 days. I was going to do this. And I said, okay, I'm going to show you. I'm going to walk out there and I'm going to say, hey, we can sweep all this parking lot here. But this area where the grass is isn't for us to sweep because this belongs to the landlord where the Wawa was that we worked. And we were not obligated to sweep it. And what I was going to do was I was going to jump from the sidewalk off the street into the grass where there was this little bush. And I was going to jump into that bush area. There was some mulch in there. I'm going to say, that's a nice little landing. This will be fun. No, it wasn't. I tell people all the time that on that day, I learned something about landscaping. I'll never forget. I go and I tell her, hey, we sweep here, we sweep there, but we don't sweep in here. And I jumped. And I'll never forget. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. I jumped from the sidewalk, the parking lot, into the area where the tree was, where the mulch was. But what I didn't know or factor in was that there was a gap, maybe 4 inches wide, and maybe an inch deep, where the mulch wasn't at. There was just a little track around where the mulch was at. Not factoring that in, I turned my ankle into that hole and pop. I heard a popping sound. And then the intense pain. I somehow stayed on my feet. I was in excruciating pain. I drug my gimpy leg to the office where I sat down in the chair and pretty much stayed the entire night. I pulled the chair out and walked around and stood up as much as I could from time to time, but the pain was intense. Fortunately, I was wearing a pair of work boots and not sneakers, but my goodness. I then am going to explain to you how I get to pat myself on the back and earn a little bit of a tough guy award here. Because I finished the shift. I didn't call anybody else. I knew it was me and 2 other people who could have finished the shift. I could have gone to the hospital, but I said, no, I'm going to stay. And I did. I stayed. I toughed it out because, for no other reason, I had promised my younger cousin Tiffany that I was going to walk with her the length of the seaside boardwalk. We're just going to walk down and come back up. So I wasn't going to break that promise. And I said, okay, this is how we're going to do this. I told my manager this thing is pretty bad, it hurts. I'm gonna just rest it and see what's going on. I'm thinking uh, I probably just what do you call it? Sprained my ankle. I'll be fine. About 8 o'clock in the morning, I get home. I always, for some reason, just because I still was athletic a lot, I kept tape. I kept athletic tape with me all the time. So what I did was I had the foam wrap too. So I wrapped my ankle up with foam. I put the tape around my foot, made a cast essentially. So I taped up my ankle, couldn't move it, put my boot back on, and I did that the second I got home. Drove down to see my cousin. Now, the important thing that you need to realize is that pop and pain was in my right foot, and I drove first about 10 miles to go get her, and then about another 10 miles to get to the boardwalk at Seaside. So I'm doing all this, and then I take that walk. It's like 2.5 miles from the top, from one end to the other of the Seaside boardwalk. And I did it. Oh, I did it. I had to stop one time in that whole period of time where it was just the pain was throbbing so greatly that I really didn't know what to do. And so I just stopped and I'm like, all right, let's get up, let's go. And I ended up knowing that I was going to have to pick my aunt up as well because she was um, finishing up work because she was working for a little bit of time over at Seaside, and I picked her up. And I said, all right, I need to readjust this thing before I drive any further. Mistake. As soon as I took off my boot, the tape was really holding up pretty well, but I needed to loosen it because it just felt like it was not right. So I started pulling off the tape, and once I pulled off the tape, my ankle swelled up so bad I couldn't even put my boot back on. At that point, we drove to the hospital that I will not name because the story is one of my favorite stories because of the hospital that I would not name. I went there and they said, "Hey, looks like probably just sprained it." Now, mind you, they took X-rays and they take X-rays to hospital. The people who look at the X-rays pretty much know what they're looking at. You would think. And they said, "Well, it appears that it's just sprained. Just gonna." They did the same thing that I had already done. They wrapped it up with an ace bandage instead of tape. And they said, "You should be okay. Let's give you some crutches, and probably about a week or so you'll feel better." And I'm like, all right, cool. I had my aunt drive me to my job, and I told them, it's like, well, they say it's sprained. And then my boss said, well, we're going to write this thing up. You got hurt here at work, and we're going to send you to the orthopedic to make sure that it's good. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Manager's taking care of me, making sure I'm all right. So I go to the appointment that they'd set up. I get some fresh X-rays from for the doctor. Now, it's so terrible. I wish I remembered his name because he was a very good doctor. I took one look at the X-ray because they left it in the room. It was actually wasn't like it is today, where your X-rays pretty much are on. a DVD. They actually still had film X-rays, and they put the X-ray on the little light, and I looked at it, and I'm like, okay. Now, from being somebody who's been X-rayed from all those other knee injuries that I had prior, I'm kind of able to read MRIs and X-rays. It's not a good thing. Ultimately, on an MRI, you look for like white spots. It's not good when you see the white. It's usually something is torn. It's not good. And X-rays, you're looking for black. And I'm looking at it, and I'm saying, what am I looking at? All right, there's a black spot right across there. Is that right? Put my hand against my chin like I'm doing right now, which you can't see. And then I looked in this orthopedics office where I was at, and there happened to be one of those skeletal feet, and it was a right foot, which makes it even more interesting because it's my same foot. And I'm looking at the foot, and I'm looking at the X-ray, and I'm looking at the foot again, and I realize that the spot where that black spot is a break, a clean break, and it wasn't even my ankle, unfortunately, that broke that I could see. You know, there's a little bone in the back of your foot, just under your ankle area, but that little bone there, I snapped it completely in half. It was floating, broke that sucker. Then the doctor came in and he said to me, "Well, clearly this is broken." And then he grabbed my ankle and he tried to move it around. And wouldn't you know, he said, "Yeah, ligament that's torn. 100% sure of it, but we're going to go and get some, give you an MRI to see just how bad it is." And then he goes, "There's a bone bruise in here. That's pretty nasty. A really bad one." Sure enough, I went to get the MRI, and yeah, the ligament was torn. The bone was clearly broken, and there was a major bone bruise. And I always love to tell everybody that the doctor said three things. Pretty generally, a broken ankle, a torn ligament in your ankle, and a sprained ankle all feel the same. They all feel the same because essentially the bone, it just what it does, it just hurts all the same. And the reason why the sprained ankle and the torn ligament feel the same is because they're exactly the same but different degrees. A sprain is just what it says. It's a ligament that is intact, but there are small tears in the ligament that need time to heal. Now, of course, if it's a ligament tear, complete tear, that means the ligament is off the bone. Unfortunately, ligaments are what you use for motion in your joints. Well, your knees, your ankles, your hips, your elbows, shoulders, there's ligaments in there that you need in order to make it move. And unfortunately for me, that ligament that I tore in my ankle in my driving foot was really bad because what happens if you don't have that ligament in place is you lose the ability to control that area. So driving was really a bad idea, and I sort of really, for lack of a better term, lucked out while driving my cousin to Seaside. And then, in fact, even just driving home, I lucked out because that ligament controlled, of course, my movement up and down of my foot. And of course, later it would become a problem than it was at the time. But what happens to me sometimes when I tore that ligament would be that sometimes my foot would get stuck because the ligament wasn't there, and it just would not react the way I wanted it to. So if I was driving and my foot just got stuck, I could have been on the accelerator. I'd have to move an entire leg in order to stop me from continuing to hit the gas. Bad, bad news. But to explain away the pain, it's really a lot of fun. The torn ligament pain, the bone bruise, and the broken bone. The broken bone, like I said, I did it August 30th, 2005, which meant that you can count the month of September as the 4 weeks that it was there. The broken bone, the pain from the broken bone, was pretty much gone after about 2 weeks. There wasn't any sharp, horrible pain. Like 2 weeks, walking in the walking boot, the pain was gone. Now, the ligament, the pain didn't really go away for about a month, where it was just really wasn't hurting as much, but it didn't work right. The actual mechanics of what the ligament was supposed to do, that wasn't going to work until I fixed it. But the pain was not a problem for me anymore. And that lasted about a month. So the month of September saw the end of my bone break pain and the ligament tear pain. I happened to have surgery on October 13th. That's a funny day. I'm glad I had it on that day. Let's just say it didn't go well for the Knights Templar. October 13th, which happened to have been a Friday, which made it even more fun. But had the surgery that day, and the bone bruise still hurt. In fact, the bone bruise didn't actually stop hurting until probably November. That thing lingered forever, it felt like. So if I ever see an NFL player or any sports team of any type where they say, oh, this player's got a bone bruise, I instantaneously will say to myself, that dude's not playing for a month. And that's with therapy, unless he's a really important player that they just decide to shoot him up with stuff. Dude with a bone bruise is not playing for a month because there's just no way. The pain is intolerable and it's really difficult to move with. And of course, this all happened. The injury was in August 30th, 2005, which, as I'm recording, not as I'm recording, as the date that this show is released, this injury happened 20 years ago on the date of release. Now, I'm going to move forward and I'm going to move a little faster because some of these other injuries that I had are much less severe. Well, one of them is. The other three, they're permanent, like all these other ones are, but I don't know how they're going to make me feel in the long run. We're going to go all the way up to the age of 36, not 35, but 36. I ended up in a little fender bender, but turns out that the way that I positioned my thumb on the steering wheel, I had a tremendous amount of pain in my thumb. I couldn't know what it was. So I went to a hand specialist, and this is in 2014, in October, just before my youngest daughter, Maggie, was born. I see the hand specialist. He looks at my hand and he sees it was a little swollen and he messes with it and he says, hey, we're going to put a brace on there for you. I'm going to keep it on for a couple weeks and you'll be all right. And just as he does that, he goes to my thumb and he moves it a little bit. And all of a sudden, it's a clear and obvious pop that you hear. It's like pop. It was just terrible. I felt a sharp pain, and then he looks at me and he says, "You know what? Maybe we'll put a cast on that thumb." You just told me you're going to put a brace on it. Then you wiggle it, and all of a sudden, there's a pop. You broke my thumb. I laughed. It's like I look at it, I'm like, you just broke my thumb because I couldn't move it at that point anymore. The thumb was just dead. It was like it checked out. My thumb said, "All right, it was fun while it lasted. This party's over. I'm checking out." And dude put a cast on it. I had a black cast on my left thumb, and it stayed there for a month. Now, my thought process was maybe giving him the benefit of the doubt for a while. I said maybe he knew that it was because he took x-rays of my hand and he knew that maybe it was on the cusp of being completely broken, but it was just not so bad. Maybe he thought that if he just broke it the rest of the way, it would heal better. I don't know. I want to think that. Not that he was a complete bumbling idiot and just broke my thumb when it didn't have to be. But either way, my thumb was broken. And he put in a cast for a month, making me probably the greatest diaper changer of all time because I changed my daughter Maggie's diaper for a month with a broken thumb on my left hand. Anybody who's ever changed a diaper knows you really need full dexterity to do that because these things, little babies, will wiggle all around. Not me. My middle finger and my index finger, they became my best friends changing the diaper on the other side. Thumb was totally useless in the process. Couldn't use it. Out for a month. First month. Absolutely crazy. A story that I'll always be able to tell. But that was my thumb. And even as I speak, that thing is hurting right now. One of the best things I can do is actually play video games because it keeps the motion in my thumb moving while I'm using the controller. It just, it helps. Well, we go through a few years of no real issues. We'll move up to 2019. Yeah, 2019, I stepped in a hole at the school that my kids were going to. Should have sued them. I'm going to start with that. Should have sued them. But at the same time, it may have been one of the best things that ever happened. I was still working early in my career as a corrections officer, and now I got this knee thing. And I had been working out like a madman and lost all kinds of weight, got in a great shape, and now my knee is hurting. Now, granted, at this point in time, I was doing legs, which I had avoided for many years because of my knee surgeries. And then my ankle didn't help matters any. I just really didn't do anything like that. But I ended up hurting my knee, and I go to what I was going to simply call, if I had to give him a name, I'd call him Dr. Stick Me. Because this man, I saw him a few times since I lived in the city of Philadelphia when we were over in the West Philly area. And I don't understand how or why this happened, but it's just what it was. This was the last time that I seen him in 2019, but I seen him prior to that in, I guess it was like 2015 or so. Saw him for a couple of visits, and I actually probably saw this man a total of 7 times, 8 times. But one thing was consistent every single time I saw him. He gave me a needle every single time. I've never been to a doctor who constantly injection, injection, injection every single time. But in 2000, most of them were lidocaine shots with cortisol. I think that other stuff is. I had three of those prior to 2019 from him. But in 2019, he had looked at my knees a couple times now. Both of them saw that they were pretty much arthritic, which is just wonderful. And he did something which is incredible. I may have mentioned it before, but what he did was he actually recommended something that I had seen for a few years prior, but I'd never actually talked to any doctor about because, like I mentioned before, I had those two knee surgeries where they just simply cleaned up the knee, pulled out the little torn pieces of cartilage and sort of mended the rest of it so that it was evened off out. He immediately recognized that the situation was going on with my knees, and he said, "You know what? Have you ever heard of this um, material that we can inject into your knee, and it sort of cushions, adds cushioning to your knee?" And I was like, "I've kind of heard of it, but I was kind of interested about it, and never really did anything about it." And so what he said is, it's a series of four injections, so four times I'm gonna have to see him, and four times he's gonna stick me. Because I think he just enjoyed giving me needles. Uh, I said, "Well, four injections," and he said, "Yeah, it's got to be over a 6 week period of time, but you're going to get four shots within 6 weeks." And at this point in time, my knee was killing me, and we were on our way soon to go on a Disney cruise. In fact, it was about going to be about 7 weeks before we went on the Disney cruise. And I said to myself, I'm going to be walking around that ship, and I don't want this pain. It's going to be difficult to get back into my workout regimen. I got to go ahead and do this. And so, right then, he gave me that first shot. And this is weird because when that material goes into your knee, it feels like I always like to use the description of imagine having a bottle of water. You know how those things have a little bit of swish to them? That's your knee. And the cartilage is already in there as that whole fact that the bottle is full. But there's that little bit of gap inside the top where there's air. What this injection is like is you stick that needle into that bottle and then you fill it the rest of the way up with water. So the water goes all the way in so that that bottle feels like it's expanding more because you got that more liquid in it. That's kind of what that shot felt like. It's like they're adding to what was inside your knee, and it just feels strange. The coolest part about it is they numb it up so it doesn't hurt. It's like a pencil tip how thick this needle is because this fluid is not like regular pain injection fluid. It's thick. It's really viscous. It's really thick, and it goes in and it just feels strange. And I made sure that when I had those shots that I wasn't working. He told me when I was doing it, he was like, it's gonna feel uncomfortable for about a day after you get it. And of course, fortunately, um, I can say this: at the Department of Corrections, you're given days off, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, and they're in a row. It's not like it's kind of like all the other jobs I ever worked at. You didn't necessarily get your days off in a row, but the Department of Corrections, your days off were in a row. So I scheduled my first shot, well, my first appointment and shot the day, the first day that I was off. And then I'd have the second day to sort of relax it. And I did the same for the other three shots. And as the injection went in, the fluid went in, it felt really, really weird the first two times. And then the third time, it felt better, but it still felt weird. But it didn't feel weird for long. Like the first one was like that entire day. And then the second day, it was better. The second one, it was probably most of that entire first day. The second day, it took faster to feel better. And then I actually had a week in between. And then I did my other two shots. When it was time for that third shot, I was curious. So I asked him, how will I know that this is working? And he said, if you really don't feel much after the third shot, it's working. And it worked. I felt great. And he said, you still need to take all four. So I did. And after I did that, went on the cruise, came back, and I wanted to test this stuff. At that time, before then, I was doing a very moderate level of leg workouts. As I would describe it, I would do no more than, rather, I would do no more than 15 reps, no less than 12. If I could do, if I couldn't do 12 to 15 reps, it was too heavy. Sometimes I wouldn't do anything other than that. And then after those shots with that material in my knee, I then expanded what I was able to do. I started doing higher reps because my knee was going to hold up, and it did. And then I started going the other way, where I would say, okay, I'll do some heavy reps. I'll do something that will let me that I can do. Um, what was it? The leg press. I always use that as my indicator because I would do 20s on leg press, but it would be the leg extensions and leg curls where I would do um, 8 to 10 heavy, and I could do that. My legs got stronger, they got more defined, and it was simply because of getting that shot. And I think that that was the solution to my problem, and that was 2019, and that was in September 2019. No, early August, September 2019, and every once in a while I get a tweak here and there, but it's not like it used to be. There were days before 2019, before I got those shots, I would have days where I was completely checked out. My knee was just impossible to work with. But after those shots, hey, I've never really had any over the top issues. I think that's pretty much the end of the knee situation, and I'm glad for it. Will I need to get knee replacements one day as the arthritis? I'm not looking forward to it, but you never know. I know I had a doctor at one time who said that my knees looked like they were the knees of an 80-year-old man. At the time when he said that, I was 17. So it's possible that one day I might have to do that. But as for now, we're going to look onward and upward. And on that note, I'm going to move towards my back and hip injuries. 2022, another birthday. My cousin Dan, Dr. Dan, his birthday. It's when I was working overnight at the jail and I fell down the stairs, ending up having a bulging disc. And turns out that when I did that, because of all the shot put, discus, wrestling, football, lifting tires from being a mechanic in a shop manager, Wouldn't you know that I ended up with some arthritis in between L4 and L5, and the fall, the fall down the stairs created an injury to my L4, L5, which was a bulging disc between those two vertebrae, L4 and L5, which is the lower lumbar, the lower part of the back. To go along with the arthritis, it's just inoperable at the moment, which I'm not going to complain about because I may have told the story before and I'll tell it again now because the only thing they could do was they gave me a couple of epidurals, which didn't work. But of course, at the same time, my hip ended up having an issue that I didn't realize either, but I should have when I fell. That also sort of made the arthritis that was in that hip, the right hip, more pronounced. So the arthritis and the bulging disc in the back and the arthritis in the hip just boom, all came together after that fall. And it was kind of like somebody turned on the light switch and then snapped the switch while it was on. Ever since that day, May, that's my birthday, cousin's birthday, August 5th, 2022. Ever since then, I have not known a single day without back and hip pain. And from what my doctor tells me, kind of is what it is. Kind of roll with it. Gotta kind of roll. Mm-mm-mm-mm-mm. Now, the bicep tear happened in 2024. Such a good start to that year. WrestleMania was a lot of, and then the bicep. That was not fun. Of course, I'm not going to go into great detail about the bicep tear because, well, I did it, like I said, a whole episode on the bicep tear and multiple videos showing my progress through the bicep tear all the way to a point of my birthday in 2025 when I did one curl, one singular bicep curl, because that was my goal to be able to do one singular bicep curl. It felt good to do it because that meant that I had some motion going in that direction, the curl. Although, because of weird things that go on which you don't realize until it happens, one of the major functions of your bicep is to literally turn your hand palm side up. That's one of the major things that your bicep actually does. And that thing connects so deeply from your shoulder all the way down into your forearm. Like there's weird nervous things that happen in your wrists, your forearm, that just don't work right. Even after surgery, it's strange. I have the inability to actually close my fist completely, and that's a good thing for people who want to try to get into a fight because the one thing you're guaranteed of is you're not going to get hit with a right hand, at least not a closed fist, because that's a guaranteed broken hand for me, and I don't need any more of that. I can legitimately stick an entire pen in my hand when I close my fist. I cannot close it completely. And the fact that it's almost been a year since that surgery, it's safe to say that the ability to create a complete closed fist is probably a thing of the past. That just means we're not going to be throwing hands like that anymore, really. Not going to happen. Now to get to the final injury, and then I have a couple honorable mentions, ones that I didn't sneak in because they weren't really surgically operated on or had a really funny story. One kind of does, but the other, I probably should have thrown them in because they do fit. In fact, I'll sneak them in before I get to the new one. We'll do that. The honorable mentions really are my shoulders, both of them. My right shoulder had some bone spurs in it, some weird functionality. I did something to it, and I'm still not really sure what it was. I remember the day that it happened, but I don't. It was within a 2 day period of time. It was a day off, and it was a day at work. Day at work, day off. I don't know which one it was. I still don't know because I was messing around with some tires, and then I ended up going downstairs in the house, and I was dragging a huge bag of laundry down the stairs, up the stairs, one of the two. And I knew that I felt some horrible popping in my right shoulder. Went, had it looked at, and they found the bone spurs. Probably a result of throwing shot put and discus. And whatever I did just popped out my shoulder enough so that I started feeling it. The other one was in 2010, and oh, 15 years ago. So that makes me 32. I had an incident in the woods, and the woods won. I fell pretty hard on that left shoulder and dislocated the clavicle in my left shoulder. And went to the same hospital that 5 years earlier didn't recognize that there was a break in my ankle, and they just simply just put a splint on it and said, "Here you go. You'll be all right in a couple days." No, I went to work 2 days later, and I had to do tires. I had to exchange jobs with some people because my shoulder just wouldn't allow me to do it. And then I just got to a point where, just like my knees, I just sort of went with it and never really got anything done to make the shoulder feel better. It just stopped hurting. I felt some pops picking up tires from time to time in the shop, and it just made me think to myself, this is not what it's supposed to be. But it is what it is. Now, moving forward to this March 2025, go to bed, go to lay down, wake up the next day, and my neck is just something fierce. Don't know what is going on. Now, mind you, I had just finished physical therapy probably a little earlier than I should on my torn bicep. And I was not interested in going to seeing another doctor, not for a while. And I just felt something just not right in my neck. And then it really started getting bizarre because when I got out of bed, my left shoulder and arm started to feel like it was tremendously heavy. And there was pins and needles going down my arm. And I started getting a lot of weakness in my left hand. And I was like, oh, this is not right. And like even right now, as I'm sitting here, my left arm is it's just not quite right. There's just some pins and needles, and the shoulder doesn't feel good. And so I had to go get my annual review with my back doctor, which I didn't know he did next too. And I'm glad he did. Hi, Phoenix. Yep, yep. Doctor does next too. Gave me the X-ray. Had a look. And wouldn't you know, C5 in my neck, the cervical vertebrae, not the lumbar, but the cervical vertebrae, which is in the neck, has some bone spurs in it, and no herniation. He was saying it wasn't quite that bad, but there was some arthritis and some bone spurs that are sitting there around C4, or rather C5, in the vertebrae. And he's like, yeah, it could potentially be pressing up against a nerve that could be working in on that shoulder, creating that weird sensation going down your arm. But I was telling him that I was also having some pain in the upper shoulder, in like a ball, which makes me wonder if just maybe somehow or another that there could be something going on with the rotator cuff. As they say in television, stay tuned. I hope that there's nothing going on in the rotator cuff because if there was, it would require surgery and it would require physical therapy. And I don't want any more of that for a while. Not at all. Not at all. But if it persists, I've been doing the physical therapy that my doctor has told me to do at home, and it's sort of made my neck feel a little bit more stable and comfortable. But if it didn't work for the shoulder, which it's not really, it's not, there's still those tingling feelings. And my goodness, I think playing those video games is one of the only things that has been keeping my hands loose and free. And I don't know. I really don't know. But at the end of the day, we'll figure it out. And however it works, it'll work. And I feel that it'll be good. But as I think about it now, I've definitely had some bumps, some bruises from the brain to the feet. But still, somehow, I managed to keep moving. At the end of the day, it's not all we can do. Just keep moving. And that's what this show is going to do. I'm going to ring the bell. Main event is over. Spear of the week. Who could it be? Who could it be? Now, when I think about the vast many of the concussions that I've had, those typically weren't my fault, except for the one, because that low hanging spot that I bumped my head in the church on is something that I was navigating for years as I went to that church forever, from the point when the time I was able to walk in that area where I knew where that low spot was when I had gotten tall enough, particularly to know that I needed to duck underneath that. And it was years and years and years, and for some reason, I had one lapse, and boom, there it was. But all the other concussions, man, they happened. The knee injury, frustration, I can't be upset about that. The second one wasn't the coach's fault for begging me to play. It was, I'm going to call it almost kind of contact because I hit the sled, but yeah, maybe the momentum from pushing off into the sled, that wasn't anything. It was a freak thing. Maybe the weird kid who couldn't really hit anything, and he got me in the eye with the ball that day. That was odd. Um, Broken thumb. That was strange that the doctor did that and never really got true justification for it. The back issue, for sure, the ankle was 100% my fault. That's one that I can't blame anybody else on. That was 100% my fault. Nobody told me to jump into that little area. That was me. My design, my choice. I own that one. That was 100% me. Just showing off. 100%. The back was a fall. And I tell you right now, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. I believe that if I wasn't working overnight when I fell, I might have gotten a faster response, especially because of the block that I was on. Laugh if you want, but I'm going to tell you for real. There were inmates on that block who would have gotten me up, would have put me back at the desk, and would have made sure nothing happened to me. I would have been off that block at a doctor much sooner because of the inmates if it was earlier in the day. And I'm just going to say that. I mean, granted, inmates are inmates, but on that block that I was on, I had a lot of rapport and a lot of respect for and back in the other direction with several of the inmates on that block, and they'd taken care of me. They would have. It's weird to say that, but I feel with 100% certainty that would have been an issue that would have been resolved much faster. Um, the bicep isn't my fault. Yeah, it was because nobody told me to try to pick up the couch to get a pen, or I think it was a pen that I was looking for, which makes it even worse. I don't even remember what it was I dropped that I was looking for. So realistically, yeah, I kind of bought that one too. This next thing was a freak thing. The shoulder, I'm going to say that the one was a freak thing. The other one, well, let's just say, wish it didn't happen. All in all, I can't really think of anything except for maybe the guy who looked at my x-ray, or at least supposedly looked at my x-ray, and didn't notice that if you're looking at x-rays all day long, you couldn't tell that that was broken. And me, as a novice, just took a plastic skeleton and an x-ray and saw immediately that it was broken. I think that guy is the spear of the week. Yeah, that guy is the spear of the week. All right. I know I've taken up a bunch of time, but I love these questions. So let's answer one. Let's see if we can get a page that doesn't have any questions answered on it at all. Here we go. Ooh, let's see. Hmm. Hmm. I'm not going to answer that one. I don't think I did it. Maybe I'm sure. No, I did once. Yeah, so we're not going to answer that. Here we go. Have you ever quit your job? If so, why? I can almost do an entire podcast on this one. I do believe I did talk about the fact that I did, in fact, quit this one job. And the reason for that quitting of that job was so ridiculous that I was being a team player who actually helped the company in a couple of ways by going in the situation that was in. I quit Mavis when I was a shop manager, assistant manager. The reason being, in 2015, when I started working there, the whole point of me working at that place, there were really three things that made me even consider going to work there. And all three things, at one point or another, got violated while working for the company. And I only had three conditions you needed to work there, and all three of them ended up becoming problematic. The one was I needed to be able to pick my kids up at school. Thus, I had to start a little later, or I had to drop them off at school, so I had to start later. And I had to make arrangements to pick them up. Now, they were going to pre-K at the time, and that was one of the arrangements. I ended up in a position where I couldn't pick them up because of the major situation. The other thing was I wanted to be a service writer. That was the only position that I wanted to take. And yet I brought my toolbox to the shop, and there was a point in time where I was working on the cars, which didn't make any sense because I was hired to be a service writer. And then eventually I ended up becoming an assistant manager, shop manager, which was where I wanted to be. And then the third and most egregious deal breaker of all was I was a mile and a half away from the shop. And then they transferred me to a shop that was 45 minutes without traffic. I literally told the people when I was working at the shop that was a mile and a half away, because what was the deal was, as an assistant manager, so I told everybody, I'm going to get here at 9 because I have to drop my kids off. When I get here, I will absolutely close every night, and the store closes at 6. So I will do the deposit. You guys can all leave. I'll take care of the deposit because it was just right up the road. I live maybe 10 minutes, not even 10 minutes, because the light situation, I was probably 5 minutes away. That was it, 5 minutes away from the shop. I legitimately can record multiple days of taking the deposit, shutting down the store, locking it up, turning on the alarm system, walking out the door at 6 o'clock, dropping the deposit off at the bank by 6:03, and then being home by 6:12. My last day at that job, the day that I had quit, in my mind and in my spirit. And now that was when it was the regular day. There was a late day, which was Thursday, and the shop closed at 8:30. I told everybody the usual thing. I am literally like 5 minutes away. I'll drop off the deposit. I'll shut the doors. No big deal. They all left because they got there early. They got there at 7. They're not to stay. I came in at 9, so we kind of layered it. There was a layer of coverage for the management. They got there early. They leave early. I got there late. I leave late. It just made sense. And the same thing would happen. I'd shut the doors at 8:30. I'm at the bank to drop off the deposit by 8:33, and I'm at home by 8:40. That's just the way it was. My last day at that shop, I was at 45 minutes away from home. The shop closed at 8:30. For some reason, we stayed a little bit longer. The guy was talking and explaining very intricately how helicopters actually use rocket engines. That's okay. But I pulled up to my house and it was 10:30. 2 hours after we closed. I was usually at home 7 minutes after the doors were locked. It took me 2 hours because when we got out of there, it was like 10 o'clock. I got home. I said it was 10:30 when I got home. At that point in time, I knew I was done. I wasn't gonna go drive all that way for nothing. And I told the regional manager, no, this is too much. I was supposed to be in and out, and this was supposed to be our Applebee's money. Why am I going to spend all day and all night at this place for Applebee's money when my 5.3 liter Avalanche was pretty much requiring me to put the Applebee's money into the tank just to get there? There goes the Applebee's money. What was the point? So that was the end of that. So yes, I did quit, and the reason, many, but the biggest one, they put me 45 minutes out of my way from a place that I was literally, like I said, best case scenario, 5 minutes. If I hit every light, which would have been one, two, three, for if I hit all four of the lights, it would have taken me 10 minutes. That's a whole half an hour of life. No, thank you. Speaking of life, make yours better. Join us. Become part of the LIP Facebook group. Join us. There's always room for one more. You can catch me on Instagram at PhilipHenderson5102. I'm out there on, what is that thing? X. I didn't know what to call it. So many different things. Um, TikTok, I'm floating around out there somewhere. Have a look. But the most important thing you can do besides that is join subscribe to the Lip at Phil the Lip channel here on YouTube. That's a big one. Trying to build up the YouTube subscribers. Now, if I could get all the people who are members of the Lip Facebook group to subscribe to the YouTube channel, we'd be making a little bit of progress. That's what we're trying to do. Make progress. Speaking of progress, I have some words of wisdom for you. And based on the episode today, I really hope that you heed these words of wisdom. Ready for them? I hope you are. Here they come. Before doing something that will have you visit with an orthopedic surgeon, ask yourself, is the story you're going to tell worth telling? I said that completely wrong, but you get the gist. Before doing something that will have you visit an orthopedic surgeon, ask yourself if the story you're going to have, is it worth it? Those are very powerful words of wisdom from somebody who is giving you a story about all the pain that I've gone through over my 47 years, particularly in the last 34. Definitely think about that. Next episode is going to be a fun one too. Going to go back to an entire segment that I stopped last year, and I'm going to do a show which is going to be a throwback to that episode. Kind of a fun, fresh, uh, I guess it's a fresh coat on don't go to jail. I'm going to talk about some of my favorite reasons why you shouldn't go to jail. And it's only made more interesting because I see this guy on, I don't know where he is. I've been catching him on Reels on Facebook where he was an inmate and he tells you how things were in jail from the perspective of, I think he was from Utah when he was in jail. But I can certainly tell you that a lot of the stuff that he's talking about is fairly accurate. It really is. The only difference would probably be, like he was saying, the location, him being in Utah, me being over here in Pennsylvania, different state, different stuff. Sometimes things tweak a little differently here and there depending on how the Department of Corrections work in each of these different states, but for the most part, he's right on. And I can certainly tell you that I'm looking forward to telling you why you shouldn't go to jail one more time. But as far as this episode goes, as painful as it was for me to rehash those memories, I hope it wasn't painful for you to listen to, even though this one went a little longer than expected. So I'll tell you now, my name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lip.